Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series, hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. It's always a pleasure to welcome an esteemed faculty member on I3, and we are thrilled to have Kezi Ban as tonight's guest speaker, photographer, and director. Currently based in New York, Kezi is a commercial photographer and director. She is represented by Blonde Artists. Starting off as a photo editor at National Geographic Adventure, she took a leap of faith and embarked on a new career as a freelance photographer after the magazine folded in 2009. Known for her cinematic style, it was a logical step for Kezi to expand her practice to include motion. These days, she enjoys working in both fields. Clients include Edition Hotels, Budweiser, Refinery 29, Higher Dose, New Balance, Ask Tia Rockwell Group, and Charles & Keith. Please help me welcome Kezi Ban to our lecture series.
You clapping. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is definitely a different experience for me. I'm sure you guys are getting used to Zoom calls, but I'm still getting used to Zoom presenting. But I'm excited to talk to you guys, especially since you all are photographers, or most of you are photographers as well, so we have something in common. I thought basically what I would do is just give you an overview of my career so far. You know, it sort of has gone from morphed from one thing into another, and it's kind of interesting to see the whole journey. And as I was, you know, collecting images and videos to show you guys, it was kind of interesting for me to, you know, review my work and kind of see how far I've come, which feels really rewarding. So let's just dive in. I'll start sharing my screen. All right. So as Jaime mentioned, I started off at National Geographic Adventure magazine as assistant photo editor. So that was a pretty amazing job. I met incredible people and just had such powerful minds and photographers and writers that were all working together to make this amazing magazine. So it kind of set the bar high. When it folded, I was invited by National Geographic Traveler to go down and do this really fun story in Peru. And I say it's the adventure that started it all because, you know, it was very symbolic of what, you know, being a freelancer is. This particular job was so hard. I don't know if you guys, about you guys, but I've never before had to shoot a story while on horseback. So that was pretty crazy. But it led me to this beautiful land and to this, you know, beautiful place. And so it was a really powerful experience. And meeting all these people, interviewing these, finding these beautiful lands. I mean, it was incredible. And the challenges that you go through on this and what you learn about yourself, I think is the most rewarding part. You know, I never would have dreamed that I would be talking to this man who was this powerful, incredible leader. And when I met him, you know, he was like hobbling along and we were about to go on this 4-day horse trek journey. And I was like, oh no, are you okay? What's wrong? And he was like, oh, I'll be fine. You know, I was just heli skiing and twisted my ankle. I'm like, heli skiing? You're like 70. This is amazing. I mean, these people are this was a lawyer and a doctor. I mean, who would have thought? So it was just such a powerful experience. And ended in, you know, one of the most beautiful places in the world, Machu Picchu. I don't know if you guys have been there, but I highly recommend it. So that was kind of, I was thrust into this and it was really exciting. It was quite scary. And then I took a brief layover at these two magazines, Art and Auction and Modern Painters. I was the photo editor and in-house photographer. And it was really amazing. I appreciated this. It was about a year I was there. And I'm just gonna show you a couple magazine covers. This one particular was awesome. I saw this is my first cover and it happened to be on a truck and I was driving around New York City and I saw this on a truck and I I was like, I've made it. I love this job because I saw and got to meet all these incredible artists. I mean, Richard Serra, I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's huge sculpture artist, incredible. She was amazing. I mean, all these moments were really special and I really appreciate it. But while I was at this magazine, I wasn't happy. You know, I really loved it there, but I felt like I wasn't doing what I was meant to do. And I didn't know what that was yet, but it was an interesting experience because I was meeting all these amazing artists, but I was kind of like, well, I want to be an artist, you know? I want someone to take pictures of me in a magazine. So that's when I left Art and Auctions and Modern Painters, and I started off officially on my own. And for me, I didn't go to school like you guys. You guys are very smart, and I'm very impressed with you taking this course. Had I known about it or realized it, I would have taken it in a second. So I'm really happy all you guys are doing this. And I'm starting off with fiction, and I say fiction because this is a little bit of work from my beginning that I was working towards, but I wasn't getting paid. So this was just test shoots and exploring and trying to figure out my style and what that was. And, you know, in hindsight, I look back and a lot of my work was quite dark. And I think this was reflective of where I was, you know, trying to search and seek and find out who I was. And I had this strange, you know, notion of, oh, well, I just have to, if I get there, you know, if I can get there and be that, then I'll be okay and I'll be a success. But what does that even mean? And so I think for me, you know, I came to this realization of it's really the journey. Okay. So anyways, exploring and just trying to find my voice during this time. But, you know, in hindsight, a lot of what I'm looking at maybe is almost a self-portrait of what I was feeling and just trying to figure out my style. During all this, I say this is fact because those were all test shoots and for fun, and these were what I was getting paid to do. And at the time, I remember feeling a disconnect of, you know, what I'm getting paid to do versus what I want to be getting paid to do. And so that's why I said fiction and fact in terms of, you know, what maybe my goal was versus what I was actually getting paid for. And it's quite different. I mean, you'll see here these images are fine, but a lot of them are events. And I just didn't see myself as an event photographer. And while I did get to meet some, you know, well-known people, obviously some famous people, this was an amazing moment, it still didn't feel like it was my voice yet. And I was trying to figure out what that was. Shot weddings even. I shot family portraits, which are necessary and beautiful things. But again, I was trying to figure out what, you know, what's my style, what's my voice. This was a particularly amazing dinner. One of the gentlemen in here, we ended up starting a project together. So I'm actually photographing his family for 10 years. So this was the first, you know, when they were babies, and over time, you know, they've grown up and we're still photographing. So I hope to see them again this year. So while those were all amazing, again, it didn't feel like this was my voice. When there was no one to shoot, you do what? Self-portraits. So this is a little self-portrait journey I did especially when I was traveling a lot. This was the Atacama Desert, which was pretty cool. This was in Croatia. Actually, to get here, I had to sneak through the set of Game of Thrones. And it was kind of crazy. It was like the wedding scene and all these like set design was just stacked everywhere. No protection, nothing. I guess that's Croatia. But it was like the scene of the Red Wedding. Do you guys remember that? Anyways, that was crazy. This is in Atacama. This is in Easter Island. This is crossing the desert between Chile and Argentina. So it's salt flats. And I, like the sense of jumping and motion before I even started motion. This was sort of in my DNA. Just had to slip one Easter Island shot in there. If you guys haven't been, it's such a powerful place. And this was a personal project I did called Don't Shoot. And it's talking about all the gun violence in America. And just, I was so depressed by it, and I still am. It's quite a challenging topic, and how it just is kind of continuous. And so I decided to just do a series, and I rented these prop guns, and it was crazy because I had to go through so much security to even rent the guns. And they were kind of scary to hold. Even though there was obviously no bullets in them, no nothing, it was still pretty intense. So I got most of my friends who I knew, and I was like, hey, would you be into this series? And luckily they said yes, but some of them said no, they didn't want to hold a gun. And I respected that. So these are just a couple stories that I guess for me, my photography has always been based in more literature and books. Of course, I've studied photographers, and I respect and I admire and look up to so many, but often my sources of inspiration came from books or from movies or from going to the museum and seeing stories and thinking about that picture or that painting or that movie or book and what I derive from it, what inspiration I get from it and put it into my own photographs. It was very, important to me to do that. I couldn't just take a picture or just take a fashion picture. And this is all part of me trying to find my voice. This was a project I did. This was one of my first photo video projects I did. And I especially before, I used to travel all the time. And I tried to take every opportunity that I traveled to set up some sort of a shoot. Because I always was so enamored by, the different lands and the smells and the food. So this was a shoot I did in Spain, and it was one of the first films I did. I won't show you the film today. So this was a 2-day shoot that I did in Spain, and I found this woman. This is actually Vidal Sassoon's granddaughter, I believe. And we had this really intense shoot where she got into character, and we had this really powerful experience together where it was just the two of us. I had a stylist, but it was just the two of us, and we did this whole story together. And I think I felt as if we were learning and growing together, just to complete this. This was another story I did that was based off of 9 short stories. It's this novel, and I had a lot of fun. Someone hired me to do this shoot, and so all of these stories are inspired from these short stories from J.D. Salinger. It's called 9 Short Stories, if you've ever heard of it. So that was a fun project. And then this one was my first bigger film that I did. This was called I See You, and I got these 2 twins. You guys might know them. They're Coco and Breezy. They own a eyeglasses line, and they're fun DJs, and they're really cool girls. So this was this fun project that I did with them, where I essentially was inspired by the Italian stories of Paradiso, where it's like also purgatory, and what was the third one? It's the 3 layers. And so we did this whole film when I got all these actresses to wear masks, and it was pretty intense. I would show you the film, but we have so much more to get through. So South Africa, chapter 1. South Africa is a special place for me. I met my husband there. So I have 2 versions of South Africa, and I think they're quite different. So it's quite interesting to see. This was the first one. This was in 2015 when I went. And I thought it was really amazing to meet all these people. For example, I went to this modeling agency and I asked them if I could borrow or use some of their models. And I was doing more of a portrait series. And because of this, because of these photos I turned, they ended up opening up an artist division within their agency. So I thought that was pretty amazing for actors to come. This was just some South Africa landscapes that were pretty powerful. These 2 models that I contacted, very good sports. You know, I just think there's always some sort of a questioning or a longing in my work, seeking and trying to find. And maybe it's because of it's who I am and that is transparent or comes through in my artwork. This was after a huge fire had destroyed all the land. And we went to in South Africa, and we went to the ashes, and I had her stand. And this was the story that was inspired by my husband and I reuniting. It's called Lost Lovers Reunited. And I got these 2 amazing models. We had this whole story there. I mean, I'm really just showing you snippets to keep things going, but it's fun memories. Now going back to the States, when I came back to New York after being in South Africa for 3 months, I met this girl who we ended up having and are still having such an amazing time together. We started off, you know, as friends, and she just became my muse and became my best friend, really. And I'm so grateful for our time together because she loved art just as much as I did and was always down to explore, you know, themes, identity, you know, who she is. This was inspired by that child book, or the Yellow School Bus. Does anyone remember? Do you remember what I'm talking about, Tom?
Yeah.
Or you remember, yeah. Magical School Bus. And we would just explore, and we would always go and seek and find these new lands. And, you know, she became just a wonderful source of inspiration for me. And also where I just got to explore. I got to try new things with her, and there was this freedom. And, you know, one thing I didn't have too much in all of these times where I'm still trying to find my voice and figure out is I didn't have school, and I also didn't assist as much. And while I did assist a little bit, I often found that a lot of photographers wanted male assistants. And I kind of refused to believe that that was true, but it kept happening. And it was a bit of a challenge because you know, how is that fair? How do we grow? You know, how as women, how do we get better? And you get better by practicing and doing and seeing other people. And so what I came to realize, since I didn't have all that experience as an assistant, you know, my trials and tribulations were my school. And I just came to realize that, you know, that it's not a failure, it's actually a success. All that you think is a failure is really you just setting yourself up for success, is growing and changing and adapting. And I found that to be so powerful. And maybe it's taking me a little bit longer to kind of get to where I am right now, but I wouldn't change anything. This was part of an Iceland series that we ended up going to Iceland. So this is still all the same girl. And we had such an incredible time. And I should say this, in most of my shoots that I'm showing you guys, there's no assistance, there's no help, it's just me. I don't know if I always recommend that, but it definitely made me put on a lot of hats and learn a lot, because, you know, when you're just doing everything yourself, kind of turn into this one-woman show, which has its drawbacks, but also advantages. So for Iceland, it was the two of us, plus we did have a hair and makeup, and then we had a local guide who saved us. But I mean, she took us all over. We went up on a glacier. I mean, mind you, it's freezing cold, and you can't tell, but this was such a crazy shoot to do, because the weather in Iceland is, as you know, a lot colder than here. And the time, it's also, this shoot in particular, this is probably 11 o'clock at night, but you can't tell. When we wrapped, I was like, oh, let's wrap. What time is it? And someone was like, it's midnight. And I was like, the sun's still up. What's going on? I'm gonna skip this too, because this is, so the previous one was this Iceland video, and it was a really beautiful video, but it's a little bit too long to show. So I thought I would just jump ahead to a fun video we made in Paris. Samantha and I, the girl you saw in all these pictures, I think we made probably over 15 films together, but I won't show you them all. But here was a fun one we did in Paris. And what that was just a little example of was I like to often mix sounds into my videos, and it's a really fun process, because to me sound is just as important as visuals for videos. And being able to craft a story through your sound, and how the relationship between audio and the visual and what that plays, I find fascinating and so important as well. So slow and steady wins the race. So this is going now to, I would say, I think of everything as like before South Africa and after South Africa. After South Africa, you know, I came back and I just had a lot stronger sense of maybe what I wanted and who I wanted to be, and explored a little bit more with, you know, conceptual and artistic, and really pushing myself to, you know, finding my voice still. So these are just some photos that over time, and I like body parts, if you guys haven't noticed. And so I'm always trying to see, you know, how we can use them to tell a story that maybe has a little bit of, you know, maybe it's a little sexy, but it's not overtly sexual, and it's never putting a woman or a man in a position that's crude. I think there's a way to do cool and sexy in a way that isn't, you know, grotesque. My favorite part about this picture is the pigeon in the lower hand corner. You guys can see that. So this is when, you know, in my career, I've really become, and I'm not showing you as many videos because I didn't know how Zoom was going to be with videos. You'll see more in a bit. But in this exploratory time, you know, what I'm shooting for tests and then what I'm shooting professionally is beginning to merge a little bit more. It isn't so, you know, black and white or opposites. And that to me was really important, in having a voice and an eye in what I want to be shooting, and not just, you know, doing all these test shoots for no reason. And still being inspired by films. I mean, this, for example, was inspired by Dr. Caligari. It's this, you know, 1940s German expressionism film. You probably wouldn't know that by just looking at the photo, but that's where I'm deriving my inspiration from. So everything always has some sort of inspiration. This was a fun result of a shoot. This esthetician dermatologist asked me to take her portrait, and I took a couple portraits, and they were they were nice. And then I said, well, now can we do something that's a little bit more fun? You know, I'd like to get a little strange. Or weird? Are you up for that? And she was like, okay. And, you know, I explained my idea and she was totally game. And so what I love about this moment is, you know, I think sometimes if you are shooting something that you're not really excited about, or it feels more like a job than, you know, creativity, end the job with something that you do want to shoot. You know, find something that is going to be more in your style than, and you take advantage of that moment. These are for nylons. This was a film that I did that was quite inspired by Alfred Hitchcock, and you'll see. And it was a fun collaboration. She's an actress, actually, and she's, you know, always supports me. So I'll play this one. This was a fun one. So since I'm doing a lot of these films that don't have audio, there's such an important connection between, as I was saying earlier, having that conversation. And so the audio is almost becoming the voice and the words of the film. So with that film, as you just saw, there wasn't really needed for words. You could see what was going on. I mean, I know it was a weird situation, but I love that power and that effect that music has in films. So this is just a little bit more of my, you know, within the past couple of years work. It's when you guys know, and just how I love body parts and exploring and trying new things and seeing what works and what doesn't. You know, at the end of the day, it's just everything's feedback, right? And once I kind of let go of this notion of failing or succeeding, it really helped me become a better artist, because the failures actually aren't failures. That's really the learning lesson. And when you really wrap that around your head, it actually pushes you and makes you a better artist. And that was something that was really just slow for me to understand. This was a fun shoot I did. It was a hair story. But what I was, I guess I should say the premise of the story is you will never smell me. And it was this idea that, you know, we live in this digital world and everything is, you know, you can touch and taste and buy and everything. But one thing that isn't transported through the digital sphere is smell. You know, we can imagine what history smells like, but we don't really know. And so that was kind of the premise for this short film. The sort of sacred space you have. Continuing with my visionary quest, I like to explore with conceptual art for some reason. I don't know why, it just interests me. Double heads. How can I use a body to kind of contort it or twist it or make it look like, you know, two heads at once? I love this space series where I combine faces and it makes me think about the landscape of a face and the story it tells and skin color and eye line and all of that. This was a video I did. Let's see if it works, using that same face concept. Just some more portraits of interesting people. Getting weird with hair and body parts again. So now I thought I would show a little bit more of my commercial work, and while I'm not showing you everything, it's beginning to be a little bit more coherent with, you know, my style and who I am. And that, as I said, you know, I think not having a disconnect and having a more harmonious workflow and you know, subject matter was important to me, or is important to me. So I guess, you know, this is for a skincare. This is for a shoe company. These are fun. These are for Puma, and these were these funny little gifts I made of stop motion. And I don't know if you guys have ever done stop motion. It's really hard. So really fun to make, but I mean, the most back-breaking work. We had all these crazy sets, and especially in this lower right-hand one with the cement, I mean, I had to wear a mask because I was like breathing in all these fumes, and it took forever to do these, but I really like how they came out, and it was a really fun project to work on. Stop motion, it's very rewarding. I don't know if you ever done that, but I highly recommend it. Although be prepared to be patient. This was a story I did for Lego. And it was this huge campaign. It was around Peter Parker coming out. It was for the Lego movie. So we had a huge, this guy who was a Lego specialist, I mean, come in and build all these sets for us. And it was really fun to get to play. I mean, I felt like a giant, you know, in a tiny world. So that was a really fun project. I don't know if you guys follow any of the Lego series, but it's fun to work with little things. And this was this HBO story I did, and you'd never think a box of donuts would be such a stressful project to work on, but I remember this project being so stressful because there was just so many moving parts, and it has to be perfect for HBO, and it was the Game of Thrones, and so all these donuts represent different shows. So it's Game of Thrones on the lower left. I can't remember, whatever the vampire movie that was out, and you know, so that's what it was. But it was like the most stressful project. I never knew donuts would be so stressful. And these are some New Balance videos that I shot recently, or I guess last year. This was a crazy project because I was brought in sort of as a, how do I explain it? Basically, they were trying to show the catalog people, the people that shot New Balance catalog, how to make you know, how to bring more life into the shoots and how to make things a little bit more contemporary. So it was this delicate situation where I had to go in and, you know, of course they knew I was there to shoot video, but it was kind of, I had to work with the photographer and make sure that we were, you know, I wasn't stepping on her toes, while also, you know, getting all this great content and showing them that, you know, there is a new way. And I think that really speaks to the fact that these huge commercial sets that used to exist are really beginning to change. And, you know, of course, I'm not sure how things are going to be after COVID, but at least before then, you know, commercial sets or any photo sets, it's really, you know, they're trying to squeeze you for all you got. So you're shooting as much as possible and as many different things as possible. And your deliverables are, you know, this huge list of deliverables. So I feel like I missed those glory days where back in the, you know, 80s and 90s even, were these huge sets and basically the photographer pressed click and it was a big party. You know, now it's like you're worked to the bone. But it was still a really fun project. And, you know, these are for social, so they were shorter. As you guys already know, photographers, you know, being a photographer or a filmmaker, really what we're doing is interviewing people with our camera. And I think that's why I love it so much, because you get to go to all these amazing places and you meet all these interesting people that you wouldn't normally meet. And I think that's why I love what I do so much. You know, for this one, for example, I went to Tokyo and I was shooting there, and that was this whole campaign for these shoes. It was incredible. This was from a magazine shoot that I did for The Perfect Man, which was so much fun. I mean, we had a huge set. You know, this was definitely not a one-woman show. But I just had so much fun. You know, you get to, it's like playing dress up all the time. This was a video that we made from it, and I love this video, so I'll share.
Give me some trouble.
So that was fun. You know, if you haven't noticed by now, music is really important to me. And I think a lot of it comes from actually a musical background. I grew up playing violin, and I played for, I think, like 11 years. And I learned the Zuki method, which is listening. And, you know, I'm laughing because of all the years and, you know, hours spent practicing and listening to music, and I never know what this would come in handy for later in life. I'm realizing it did. So Mom, if you're listening, thank you for making me play the violin. Yeah, it was just, it's helped me tremendously with editing. So if you guys are musicians and you have some form of, I don't know, connection with that, I think it'll help you with editing if you get into video. I say South Africa Chapter 2 just because I think it's such a stark contrast to what I was shooting a couple years ago. This was a test shoot. I got these girls together. I had one girl, local girl from South Africa, helping me. We got these, you know, outfits from Zara. obviously not the most high-end shoot, but I guess it just goes to show you what you can complete in a couple hours. I mean, I took these girls, I researched the location, I found everything, and we just shot for like 3 hours, and you know, produced some really fun results.
Mbadeuyo angana yerefa nyaniede mbadenuyo jonti yerefa la idenu bila nyana pinjugula ubumine kufoloko toko sunguru ba muso dendewa jongani yerefa nyani.
So I don't know if I really mentioned this, but I think I said something in the beginning, but I just want to reiterate. You know, I used to have this notion that, you know, this process of being an artist or whatever, there's like this end goal, and like once you get there, you know everything. But that is not the case at all. And I think it took me a long time to realize that, but I keep being like, oh, if I just, you know, get this next job, then I'll have made it. You know, all these things, indicators in my head, I'll make it. But what does that even mean? And I found that so much more peaceful once I accepted that, you know, there is no end goal. It's a continuous process as an artist, and, you know, you're always evolving, and you're probably going to hate a lot of your work that you used to do, because you're going to look back and be like, oh, what was I thinking? But it's also really exciting to see like this journey of your work and how far you come and all the things you learned. And, you know, even just going back through these images, it makes me feel great, because I'm like, wow, I have come a long time. My style has become much more cohesive, and I'm, you know, much more in tune with myself and in line with myself. And that's also just part of, I think, growing up. But, you know, don't think that there's a specific, you know, finish line, because there's no finish line. You're always in this process. And this last little series I'm showing you is something I shot right before we went into quarantine. And it was a really fun project. And I had a big team, but I sourced it all, I produced it all. And I think it was really rewarding working with these French musicians that created original music for the 3 little films. So that was really fun. If you guys, I highly recommend working with, you know, original music, because it just gives it an extra little special kick. And again, this was a test shoot, so I had 6 hours to do everything. And I don't know if you guys have a concept of time, but 6 hours to do hair and makeup, 3 different sets, hair and makeup for 3 models, you know, it's a pretty short amount of time. So, you know, I don't know, maybe if I spent a day on these, it would be better, but I'm excited about what I did with the little time I had. And this was, all 3 of these were inspired by light therapy. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but light therapy is this notion of different light produces different results in your skin or your teeth or your mental well-being. So that was inspired by this. And I used you know, I've used in several of the stories I've showed you guys, these RE sky panels, which are these beautiful lights. Unfortunately, they're a little expensive, but if you can get your hands on them, or if we can do it in another class, I really highly recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kezi.
Thank you.
Let me check the chat room here. We have time for Q&A, so we'll go to that next. In order of submission here, Hannah Stapleman asked the question, where are you getting these jobs? Are you seeking the clients out, or are they coming to you? How are you finding these locations and props?
Okay, I'll respond to the first one. I meant to mention this before. I think the biggest thing I can say to you guys is relationships are everything. My career started off in a way that when I was talking about the disconnect between maybe what I was shooting versus what I was getting paid for, that was more often than not, people that were hiring me were people that I knew, which wasn't a bad thing. It was just, you know, someone would recommend me. So more often than not, the majority of my career has been recommendations, personal recommendations. People contacting me, someone recommends me. So I really want to emphasize that that is just as important as your skill, because at the end of the day, there's a million talented photographers and filmmakers, but if you have a great attitude, you're positive, you're creative, you can think on the spot, that is what gets you the job. And so for all these jobs that I've done, even if I wasn't always in alignment with myself, I was getting these jobs because of my people liked me and they wanted to work with me or they recommended me. So more often than not, in the earlier side, in the later half of my life, you know, I shouldn't admit this, but I will admit this. I am terrible at marketing myself. I mean, I've sent out a few emailers, but they always just kind of bore me. And it's like, what's the point? Just, you know, can end in someone's trash. And I think I'm partly bad at it because I've been good at face-to-face marketing, so to speak, face-to-face networking, or Zoom face-to-face. And I just want to reemphasize that there's a lot of talent out there, but your personality and how you reach people is how you're going to get the job. In terms of locations, that's pretty much research. I mean, I basically, you know, in some of the South Africa image, in the first work, there was like this old abandoned car, there was like a car graveyard. So all these old cars just were there and I happened to find it. So a lot of what I've done is research, finding something that interests you and then going to check it out. Location scouting it's actually really fun. I don't know if you guys do that or if that's an assignment that you give them, but you know, going to this new place and envisioning what the shoot is, it's almost as fun because it brings you all these ideas and being in the land or wherever you're location scouting really adds to, you know, the magic of the shoot. Props, I don't know, the props is kind of case by case.
All right, there's another question from Mark Kovacevic, where he says, can you say a few words about the rights for the music used in the videos?
Good point. Well, except for one, all of them I've gotten permission for. So that's always a process. And I highly recommend it because it's also respecting the artist. You have to realize that we're artists and they are too. So there's and that's another reason why I like to use original music because it's even more special. But there's a ton of sites now that you can purchase licensing for music, and it's actually been really helpful especially this past year, like a lot of different sites have exploded on the scene. So finding music is pretty, not easy, but it's not as difficult as it used to be in licensing music. So for all of them except one, they're licensed. And I am just realizing that one isn't. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Here's a comment, not a question, from Alpha Frid. She says, I did 13 years of Suzuki piano. So I know what you mean about the background coming in handy in places you never thought it would.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I love that. I really encourage, I mean, music's amazing anyways, but I think it's really rewarding when you can connect something from your past into your future, your current life. So if that is the case, and I remember, Alpha, you are good at editing, so you should keep that up. And trust me, I remember it took me a long time, and I'm not trying to sound discouraging, but it took me so long to get comfortable editing videos. I mean, it wasn't like I did one, then I was like, oh, I get it. Not at all. It really takes practice, and I'm not trying to at all dissuade you guys or discourage you guys, but just be easy on yourself, because it takes a little bit of time. But when you start getting it, it's really exciting. And I think that's why I love, the conversation that music has, and how much you can add to your film. So, and if you guys, do have any questions on where to source music, I'd be happy to share some of the sites that I go to.
Moving on, there's another one. I hope I get the pronunciation right on your name. Fongvo the Great. Hi, Kezi, nice to see you again. And thanks for sharing your experience with us. My question is, as a woman working in such a male-dominated industry, have you ever felt intimidated to ask what you want, or just feel intimidated by the whole male colleague thing? Do you think you have to explain yourself more to get what you want?
It's a great question. And yeah, we've battled with this for a long time. I think the past couple years, I've seen a big shift. I think women are trending. It's trendy to be a woman now. But no, in all seriousness, it was a big part of a big intimidation for me. And for a long time, especially when I was trying to get going and try to understand, and not being hired because I'm a woman, I mean, that doesn't feel good. And it did kind of break my confidence, because, you're like, well, I'm strong. I can just do everything that they can. Like, why wouldn't you hire me? But I think, initially I took that and I was like, well, I'm just going to do everything myself. And that's why I became this kind of one-woman show. But I think once you realize that you have the right to ask questions and to learn, and not knowing is okay. I mean, that's the whole point. If you already knew, why would you be doing it? So I just really encourage you to, whenever you feel that way, just try to remember that, first of all these people used to be in your shoes, okay? No one wakes up and they're this amazing photographer or filmmaker. And just to be persistent. I mean, don't let that get you down. And even if it does, and I'm sure it will, like, create other ways that you can either find out the information or seek, or ask a woman if you feel more comfortable. But I guess when I look back at myself, and I think of all the times that I was maybe too shy or didn't know, I kind of regret that, because that's how you find out. That's how you learn, is through asking questions. And I really encourage you to always, even if you feel like it's stupid, ask the question, because what's there to lose?
All right. Here's one from Kaminsky. He says, the images with the airy sky panels, how much color was created on set as opposed to the post?
Good question. Well, for all you guys that I taught video to, do you guys remember what log is? Fun times. Anyways, so you almost have to shoot videos with desaturated color, but then add it back in. So I guess more often than not, when I'm shooting a video, it looks more desaturated than it actually is. And then in post, you have to kind of bring in the color. But I definitely push the color on a lot of these to give it a little bit more. I don't think anything is naturally that saturated. The reds, though, I've noticed the red, that's the hardest to shoot with skin. And that's often very red and strong and kind of washes everything out. Just a random tip or comment.
Here's one from Tomash, our department chair. Hi, Kezi. Thank you for a great talk. Would you discuss the process of getting representation?
Yes. Well, again, that came through relationships. I definitely did, you know, I was searching for an agent, but I got rejected a lot. I mean, people, it was either they had a full roster, or they weren't looking for me, or I wasn't there yet for them, you know, a whole host of reasons. And, you know, I've come to realize that being represented is amazing, but it doesn't change as much as you think. It's not like you get an agent and then all of a sudden you are just banging out jobs. It doesn't really work like that. You're still the main person finding your jobs. The agent really helps with managing maybe clients or handling the money side or things like that. And so I found, I was introduced by a client of mine. I was introduced to this man who I know he was starting this artist agency and he was looking for artists. So I started with this artist agency from the ground up, which I think was helpful. I think it can be a little intimidating when you're trying to break into this, you know, artist group that has all these big names on them. So I happened to be introduced to this man who had just started an agency. So that was helpful. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why I got represented, but again, it came down to relationships, and this person, you know, was introduced to me by a trusted source. And I think that really helped. So, you know, you guys are all in school right now and you have all these amazing teachers at your fingertips. I mean, these are the relationships that matter. And these are the people that are going to help, you know, suggest, you know, maybe they'll recommend you. And, you know, when you're younger, and I'm not saying you guys are all young because you're not, but you kind of don't think of people that way. You don't think, you know, you may do something and you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like that person, I won't see them again. But really, it definitely matters. I mean, everything is about relationships. And so I think if you can, instead of forcing yourself on a situation, be like, okay, if I want, say, to be represented, who are the people that work there? And maybe, do I know someone that knows someone? Do I, you know, how can I reach them in a way that's unique to me and to them? Because at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And, you know, so the more human you can be and more in tune with yourself and authentic, that will be heard with an artist representative, I think.
I think you've probably just answered the next question, but I'm going to state it just
Okay.
the same. And if you feel like you have anything to add on top of that, this one is coming from Alexis, and it says, what are your thoughts on finding mentorship? How does one find a mentor?
I believe in mentorship so much. And, you know, you could even have a mentor and they don't even know that you're their mentor. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but I have this one guy, Derek Sivers. He doesn't know who I am, but I love listening to him, and, you know, I consider him a mentor. But in terms of a real mentor, yes, because again, the more support you have, the more, you know, you can bounce ideas off, you'll grow. That's the best way. And in terms of finding a mentor, again, it goes back to being a human. I guarantee if you reach out to whoever, if you're, say you have a couple of photographers that you really admire that are, it doesn't even have to be in your hometown, it can be anywhere. If you reach out to them and you know, write a nice email, explain a little bit who you are, and ask if maybe it doesn't have to say flat out if you want to be their mentor, but start a relationship with them. And that is the mentorship. You know, you don't even have to say, will you be my mentor? You can just start a relationship with someone that you admire. And if you ask questions and you connect with them, that will naturally start a mentorship. But I 100% recommend it.
All right. Kezi, I have a question myself, and it's kind of just a timely question, honestly. It's about how the current pandemic has affected your ability to work, or what are some of the challenges you encountered in the strange times that we're living through?
It's a really strange time. You know, I would say on one hand, I feel fortunate because I feel like, well, let me just explain. Right before the pandemic hit, I actually had shot so much that for the first month in the pandemic, I was in post-production. So I kind of didn't really feel a disrupt in my regular schedule other than not being able to go outside. But after that kind of I started to catch up, you know, I realized that there's all these other, you know, maintenance and tech cleanups and all these other things I could do. So I started working on that. But then what I started doing, and I really urge everyone to do this, is I started paying attention to what does safety on set look like. So for the past couple weeks, I've been attending all these webinars and Zooms and reading, and I took this course to get certified on how to be safe, because if we are going to have a future with sets, I mean, there's no way we can go back to being how we were, at least not for a little while. And so I think I'm trying to be the most informed I can in order to be able to give confidence and safety to my clients. You know, I need to know so that I can help manage a set. You know, studios are going to have their own rules and regulations, but what are things that I can do so that I'm 100% being, you know, held accountable and safe for not just myself, but for everyone around me. That has been a big focus of what I've been focusing on right now, because it's just the only way to go forward is to know how to be safe.
Well, that's really smart and responsible. And Kezi, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate you. And of course, you know, there's her website where you can go back and look at some of these videos. I suspect internet connectivity is a little hard now that we're all connected all the time at night and streaming videos and whatnot. So, I mean, I just want to say thank you for being such a good sport. And the website is there, and frankly, a lot of really great content in the motion section. So I recommend you go and take a look at that. And thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
It's really wonderful to be part of this. Thank you, everyone.